On today's show, we break down 5 of the top performers in the prospect world from this past week.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, and today we have an exciting show in store for you all where we're going to be diving into the Rinkside Roundup as we do every week, breaking down 5 of the top performing prospects. This is always based on an article series over at Elite Prospects shared by myself, as well as former co-host here on the channel, Hattie Kalakash. This week's edition is based on an article that Hattie wrote. It will be linked in the description as always, and please feel free to go give that a read as well. It is free to access for anybody, so no need to have a subscription to read this content of ours, and it definitely goes hand in hand with the podcast variation, and the players that we're diving into today are very, very interesting ones. One of my favorite prospects in the NHL world at the moment, who also has missed the entire season up until very recently to injury following being drafted by the San Jose Sharks this past draft. Igor Chernyshov has been on fire with the Saginaw Spirit, complementing Michael Misa extraordinarily well in that top 6 for the Saginaw Spirit, and he will be the focus of our first segment. In the second segment, we'll be looking at a pair of WHL scoring centers with Berkly Catton of the Spokane Chiefs, as well as Brayden Yager of the Lethbridge Hurricanes, prospects of the Seattle Kraken and Winnipeg Jets, respectively. Both have been on real scoring tears. And in the final segment, we'll be looking at a pair of scoring wingers from the USA, one who's already drafted, Sam Harris of the University of Denver, and the Montreal Canadiens, who scored 4 goals this past week, is definitely a name to note, as well as Jack Murtagh of the US NTDP, who had a very strong tournament at the U18 Five Nations tournament for the USA, and he scored 2 goals and 7 points this past week, really showing his playmaking side as well as the scoring. But let's just dive into the first segment here with Igor Chernyshov, a player that, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you are already more than familiar with, because Hattie and I have both been raving about this player for over a year at this point. This is a 6'3", 200-pound right shot left winger who has a high-end release, really, really powerful shot, but it is his physical side, his power forward nature, the violence with which he can play, the motor that's underlying this whole style that makes him really quite special. This is a player with some really good anticipation abilities, and a guy that me and Hattie, as I said, raved about a lot. If you want to see the entirety of that, I will link the scouting report we did on him for his draft year campaign in the cards above. And yeah, a player that I have a lot of time for, and unfortunately missed much of the season to start to injury, and he had a surgery after being drafted. And only has 6 games under his belt so far this season, playing his first game back from injury on January 30th against the Kingston Frontenacs. And he has scored in every single game since then. He's scored 2 goals in 4 of those 6 games, including his first one back from injury. And he overall has 10 goals and 18 points in 6 games in the OHL. The Saginaw Spirit are scoring more goals, or goals at a higher rate than any other team in the OHL at the moment. Michael Misa was the first CHL player to hit the 100-point mark, and he did that in less than 48 games. He's at 102 points in 48 games with 46 goals and 56 assists, which is by far leading the team. And second place is Zane Parekh with, of course, 74 points in 46 games, because this is a very special talent offensively from the blue line. And there's a lot of supporting cast members beyond that, like Christian Epperson, Callum Mangone, who are well over a point a game and playing some excellent offensive hockey. But what Igor Chernyshov brings to the equation is a true compliment to Michael Misa to be the most dangerous offensive player on any given night for the Saginaw Spirit from the forward core. Zane Parek's, of course, always in contention when that is a blanket statement for the entire team of skaters. But of course, Igor Chernyshov, I think, is a player that with his physical profile, his strength, his desire to get to the middle of the ice, his goal scoring strength, but the high end handling that is really opening up some playmaking opportunities for him already in the OHL. There's a lot to like with this player. He was a real steal for the San Jose Sharks to get at 33rd overall, I believe, in the 2024 NHL draft. And I think that not only can San Jose Sharks fans be very excited for the arrival of this player, but Saginaw Spirit fans, this is, I mean, the excitement you must be feeling going into a Memorial Cup run potentially again here is something special, because Chernyshov gives them a caliber of power forward that they haven't had even when they won the Memorial Cup last season. He's a real different type of profile to that offensive roster, and I think alongside a highly intelligent two-way playmaking center like Michael Misa, it's going to be special this season. And of course, the 3 points a game to start his OHL career, just 6 games in now, including 10 points in his last 5. It's been excellent here for Igor Chernyshov, and a player that I had ranked inside my top 15 for much of last season. I think in the end, he ended up between 15 and 20 on my board, but a player that I think has real top 6 upside at the NHL level. It's only a 6-game sample at this point. I'm not going to really change my stance on the player compared to what I was saying last season, but the fact that he's come back so seamlessly from a lengthy injury, missing half a season, it bodes very nicely for the short, medium, and long term for this prospect's projections. At the NHL level, I see a player that will be able to score goals, but perhaps makes the biggest differences by leveraging his physicality, motor, and handling ability to be just a dominant puck possession kind of player, especially alongside guys like Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith and William Eklund. I think that Chernyshov is an excellent complement to those guys to do some of that dirty work, to throw his weight around, and to open up space for those guys to use their skill in, but also having the intelligence and handling ability to keep up with them at that level in a top 6 capacity. I think there is that upside with Igor Chernyshov. A guy like Quentin Musty could play a more soft skill version of that role as well, on a top line potentially in the end. But I'd be curious to see how Chernyshov and Musty continue to develop between them, because with those two and Kasper Halttunen, you have 3 bigger bodied prospects with good goal scoring upside and really good skill in the offensive zone in the San Jose prospect pool to kind of potentially slot in that top 9 long term, even within the next 2 years. I think those players can start making their ways into the NHL lineup. But that wraps up this first segment, diving in on Igor Chernyshov. In the next one, we'll be looking at Berkly Catton and Brayden Yager, who've both been scoring a lot of points in the WHL. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every single week, you can customize your meals to fit your kind of lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried Protein Plus meals that are packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is truly unbeatable. No prep, no mess, and great food in just a couple minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment with Berkly Catton and Brayden Yager. These are two WH centers that are likely in their final seasons at the WHL level in their development. Berkly Catton might get one more, but I'd love to see him push for an NHL spot in training camp next season. The captain of the Spokane Chiefs has 81 points in 41 games this year, including 30 goals, and has just been on absolute fire since his team went out and acquired Berkly Catton from the Kelowna Rockets. And those two have combined for some of the most dynamic rush sequences in the WHL this season. And the scoring has just been off the charts. Catton has 15 points in his last 5 games, including 8 goals, 23 points in his last 10. This has been the norm ever since Berkly Catton was acquired, over a 2-point-a-game average, and it's included just some breathtaking performances. Like in a 9-1 victory over the Seattle Thunderbirds, Berkly Catton scored 4 goals and 5 points and was a +4 in that game. Hattie wrote about this game in specific in his article, and it was just an absolute thrashing. As Hattie writes, Catton may very well be the most refined transition attacker in the entire WHL as he combines quick crossovers, backhand skill, upper body protection, and deceptive handling to continuously create through rush patterns. This is a very dynamic player, and he's been using that to create so much offense this season, over 2 points a game, as I mentioned. I don't think there's going to be all that much left for him to learn at the WHL level beyond just this season. I'd love for this to be the year that he just dominates the league and uses that as his propeller to just gain a spot in an NHL lineup next season. I think that playing a level up is where he's going to develop. I don't think he's going to be a player that dominates the NHL out of the gate. I think he's going to need a real period of adaptation, not unlike Will Smith in San Jose this season. But I do think that, like Smith, once he gets settled a bit, that the playmaking and the dynamism start to show a lot more consistently, and even are able to win some games at the NHL level for his team. And playing alongside just reliable centers there in Seattle, guys like Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, will really benefit Berkly Catton to also just play on that wing where he's able to most lethally leverage his high-end speed and that dynamic ability off the rush. I think his development in terms of position might mirror a little bit that of Alex Newhook in Montreal, where sure, he's tried at center at times, but because there are more responsible alternatives on the team, also among younger players, that he's moved out to the wing, and that's where he's really able to gain traction, find comfort, and excel offensively at the NHL level because of that game-breaking speed and the high-end creativity at those paces, which is something that Berkly Catton definitely has in more abundance than a player like Alex Newhook does. Yeah, Catton's been fantastic this season. Moving on to Brayden Yager of the Winnipeg Jets, a player that has 59 points this season, including 20 goals for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. And he scored 2 goals and 6 assists in 8 games this past weekend, including yet another 5-point display, just like both Igor Chernyshov and Berkly Catton had in the last week as well. So ever since being traded from the Moose Jaw Warriors, where he was the captain to start the season, there he played 21 games and had 30 points. Ever since the trade, in 18 games, he has 32 points, a better pace than previous, and he's really learning to dominate at the WHL level. This is not the player with the most dynamism in his game, especially compared to guys like Berkly Catton, as we just mentioned. And I think we saw that at the World Junior Championships back in December and January. He scored three assists in 5 games, which I believe was joint lead in Team Canada scoring at that tournament as the team's captain. That was just a dismal performance for basically everyone involved, and especially amongst the coaching decisions made. But still, outside of that vacuum of that really bad World Junior Championship, it's been a good season for Brayden Yager. He's shown a lot more diversity in his game. He's shown a lot more of the playmaking side of his game and the play connection, using his role down the middle as a center to just bring his teammates into the play consistently. And this is something that's really blossomed in his game over the past year or two. A player who's previously really been more of a shot first kind of player, especially in his draft year campaign, but since then has grown the playmaking aspects, and I think that's been flourishing this year. Especially, it makes his game a lot more mature. I think it's going to make his life a lot easier at the NHL level to be comfortable at high pace, connecting plays between his wingers, and acting as a fulcrum rather than a solo driver or a solo rush attacker, like he tried at various points in his development as well, where he just doesn't have the dynamism or the speed to execute those plays like other more dynamic players could, even at the WHL. Even at the WHL level, and especially once he moves up in ranks against pro competition. That said, I think this player is developing really nicely for the Winnipeg Jets, a player that they acquired in the offseason in the Rutger McGroarty swap deal. And I think at the time, I definitely preferred the Pittsburgh Penguins side of that in terms of Rutger McGroarty as a player over Brayden Yager. I still probably feel that way, but not as resoundingly as I did in the summertime. I thought that McGroarty would transition to the pro game more fluidly than he has so far, and perhaps show a little bit more of the goal scoring dynamism than he has just yet at the professional level. He will, of course, need time, especially with his skating limitations that remain a factor. But still, I think Brayden Yager is developing nicely for the Winnipeg Jets, and that in the end, they're both players that will probably be vying to be third line centers, and if they hit second line centers at the NHL level. And I think that both are still kind of trending in that direction. So perhaps it's not as weak of a trade as I thought it was to begin with in the summertime, because Yager has been playing some really good hockey, playing intelligently, composed, really embracing his leadership roles wherever he's been playing, whether with the Moose Jaw Warriors or Team Canada or now with the Lethbridge Hurricanes. He's been leading on and off the ice, and I think that with perhaps a little bit more time developing in the AHL, this is certainly a player that can translate some scoring to the NHL level and maybe be a Derek Brassard kind of middle six center who can really chip in on offense. Has a couple seasons where he hits 50 points, 55 points, and plays an important role on a team's power play and just in terms of adding depth among team scoring, but perhaps not a player with real top line upside. Still, really great week for this prospect. I've been loving watching him play this year, especially. I think he's making a lot more intelligent decisions on a consistent basis than he was in past years. And I think that the Winnipeg Jets have a pretty good player on their hands in this one. And seeing how well they're doing in the NHL this season, getting reinforcements like Brayden Yager in the next year or two is just going to be a bonus. And I think that he's going to be an NHLer within that time frame, because he's really been rounding out his game and ironing out most of the issues that I had with it going back to his draft year campaign. So a really interesting prospect here for the Winnipeg Jets. But that wraps up this second segment. In the next one, we'll wrap up the show by looking at two final players: Sam Harris of the Montreal Canadiens, who's been scoring loads of goals in a third line capacity for the University of Denver, and Jack Murtagh, who continues to explore his playmaking game and scored a bunch of points at the U18 Five Nations tournament over the past week. All that just after these messages from our sponsors. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shelf variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for my busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Alrighty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment. Starting off with Sam Harris, a Montreal Canadiens prospect who's been scoring loads of goals in the NCAA over the past months, and honestly, this entire season. He has 19 goals and 28 points in 27 games, and he hasn't really been touching the top six very much this year. He did score a hat trick against Arizona State University, the first of his college career, and that did come in a game with 16 minutes of ice time. But for much of this season, up until the last month and a half, he rarely played more than 15. It's been a very recent trend that he's been in that top six, playing some games 18, 19, 20 minutes a night. So a player that's been gaining the coach's trust, and at 5'11", 185 pounds as a left shot winger, he isn't the most violently physical of players, but it's his off-puck movement in the offensive zone, as well as his dogged forechecking and high motor and strong reaction speed that get him his goals. He's a player that likes to get to the dangerous areas around the net front, whether as a net front presence or perhaps a bumper. He loves to just kind of buzz around those areas and pick up rebounds, go for tipped shots, try to make life difficult for both the defenders and the netminder. And it's been extremely effective this season, especially with the quality of blue line shots at Denver, with Zeev Buium especially. Likely the best player in the entire NCAA at timing his shots from the blue line with flybys, with tipping threats, with screens. And Sam Harris has absolutely loved that. And he's been scoring so many goals. In that 3-goal performance, which was the focus of Hattie's in the Rinkside Roundup article, they all came from that area as well. One of them came more from like perhaps the mid slot, and that was like a good release that I think an NHL netminder probably would have saved. But the two others were just right from the net front, rebounds, tips, quick little shots from in tight. That's where he likes to play in the offensive zone. And defensively, this is also a player I think that has really improved his off-puck positioning, gets involved, is able to time his pressure really well, and sticks to his assignments quite dutifully, which has been, as I mentioned, gaining him that trust from the coaching staff. And a player that's been progressing on multiple fronts. I think the goal scoring in a depth capacity is very interesting. If you're the Montreal Canadiens, you're looking at your current lineup and players like Jake Evans and Yoel Armia, who are scoring some really valuable depth goals for you, are on expiring contracts, may be traded by the deadline. They'll be looking for goal scorers to also kind of fill out the bottom of their lineup to give the team a boost on the offensive side of things, even when the top players aren't scoring goals. And they already have guys like Emil Heineman who certainly fit that kind of mold. I think Sam Harris is a perfect fit in that as well. And another really deft draft selection by the Montreal Canadiens scouting staff. They picked him in the 4th or 5th round in 2023. That was the draft in Nashville, and it was 5th round selection, 133rd overall. And he was selected as a 19-year-old, almost 20-year-old. So as a D+1 playing out of the USHL, he scored 30 goals and 56 points in 56 games that season, really breaking out as a USHL goal scorer, almost doubling his scoring from the previous year on a very weak Sioux Falls Stampede team. And he's just been progressing very steadily ever since. But to wrap up the show, let's focus on Jack Murtagh of the USNTDP. A sniper, a true goal scorer with a wicked release, so much power behind his shot. He's a 6'1", 198-pound left shot, left winger. He can play at center, he can play at right wing. He's a versatile offensive player, but he's definitely at his best as a goal-scoring winger. This season with the NTDP, he has 14 goals and 34 points in 33 games. But this past week, he was playing in an international competition with the NTDP against Czechia, Switzerland, Finland, and Sweden. This is the yearly U18 Five Nations tournament. The USA went 3-1 at that tournament, only losing to Sweden, but losing very convincingly 7-2 in that game. And still, Jack Murtagh picked up assists on both of the USA goals. He scored 2 points as well against both Switzerland and Finland, and scored an assist in the final game against Czechia in a 2-1 victory. A player that was very involved for his team, and one of our elite prospect scouts, our Swedish scout, Jimmy Hamren, was able to catch the tournament live and had this to say about his live viewings on Jack Murtagh, which Hattie, of course, also included in the article. Murtagh shows a lot of pro habits already in his game. He is strong on his skates and has physical strategies to help him win and contain pucks along the boards, and also separate in the next sequence. He seems to recognize where the open space is and makes fast plays to open up. he definitely had some nice playmaking moments in this game, mostly from the boards to the middle of the ice. I think that describes Murtagh's playmaking game very well. He's not the most dynamic, like rush playmaker in the world, but he's a player that is dogged in board battles and is able to find the pass, the most dangerous pass, directly when he tries to get the puck inside off the boards. And his accuracy in attempting those has also gotten better and better as the season has progressed, and especially as it did here in the tournament internationally. At the USHL level, I think it's been a little bit more limited, but I think that has also been improving over the course of the last couple of months. That said, Jack Murtagh is a player that I definitely see as a first-round option for teams at the 2025 NHL draft. A player with some real upside as a goal scorer and as a checking winger. He is so intense. He's so physical, has such a hard shot, but there's some such clear foundational elements to build around. He has the will, he has the desire to learn and to grow and to work hard. I think with that combination, he's going to be a middle six winger in the NHL. I believe in that upside. I think he's going to be really effective in that upside wherever he lands in that capacity. A player that makes his team better, makes his teammates' lives easier, and gets underneath his opponent's skin because he is a pain to play against oftentimes. Doesn't always make the right decisions. There's definitely still some immaturity in certain habits of his. But that said, I think that represents runway for growth for this player rather than big like limiting weaknesses that are going to hold him back from becoming an NHLer. He's going to need some time to refine and develop. And of course, there's never such thing as a sure thing outside the top 5 or top 10 of any NHL draft. But I think Murtagh is a player that I would believe in that 20 to 30 range on draft day with real upside, even to be a second line goal scorer. And if that doesn't hit, you have a really valuable type of third line or bottom 6 checking winger that just brings a lot of energy, a lot of value to your lineup, and becomes a fan favorite. And I think if that's kind of your floor with the player, that's a pretty good value. And what he's been showing at this tournament, I think, just kind of reinforced that and was definitely worth a mention in Hattie's Rinkside Roundup. But that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everyday listeners. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steele break down everything going on fantasy hockey at the moment, and where you can learn how to build not only the most competitive, but the most sustainable fantasy hockey lineup. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about the episode and which prospects have been standing out in your eyes recently. Who are your top performers over the recent stretch among hockey prospects? I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you tune back in very, very soon.